Matter of fact, the My Big Toe model explains those very well. And they are a result of what's called collective consciousness. And sometimes you hear that called as a group consciousness. And what a group consciousness is, it's a vector sum of all of the consciousnesses that belong to the group. Okay, now let's start out with something simple like a mob. A mob is a group. A mob is a bunch of angry people, a bunch of very angry people, and that mob has its own collective consciousness. If you join that mob, then you will become angrier than you were before you joined that mob. Mm-hmm. It's this collective consciousness. And that mob will do more terrible things than any one of the members of that mob would do on their own. But together, they can, they're much more brutal than they would be individually. And that's because that angry mindset that they have affects each other. Each person's anger helps other people feel angry as well. That's a collective consciousness that would belong to that group if you feel like you're a part of that group. Now, the way you either are or are not a member of that group is just by your own intent. Do you see yourself as a part of that group? If you don't, then that collective consciousness is not going to bother you. It's just going to bother those people who identify themselves as a member of that group. Now, this works on all levels at all sorts of groupings. So if we have a grouping, say, as big as humanity, okay, well, humanity has its own collective consciousness, where it's kind of the sum of all the humans, and it contains information of what it is like to be human, of what it means to be human as we are human. Not some fundamental concept of human, but it's the vector sum of all the people that are in the group. So that's of all the humans. So you might think a human collective consciousness would have to be very broad. It wouldn't be too specific. It would be a very broad sort of thing. But there are human archetypes, as well as male-like archetypes and female archetypes, and like you said, mother and father archetypes. But you also can have national archetypes, a country, from all the people who in their mind associate themselves with that country. Then that country has a collective consciousness. And somebody from the outside comes in and says, well, okay, I want to be a part of this country now. Well, now in their mind, they've associated with it, and they start getting information from that collective consciousness, which means they start acting a little more like the people in that country. They think a little more like it. They start to become like that. And even a corporation, if you have a corporation like Mercedes-Benz or IBM. Caterpillar, yeah. All the people, or Amazon even, all the people that are a member of that, so everybody that works for IBM, they all have a collective consciousness as well. And when you go into work for IBM, you'll notice that your attitudes and your feelings and your values start to change a little bit. You start to become more like the people from IBM. And all the people in IBM kind of dress alike. They kind of have, similar ideas about life and reality and that sort of thing. So you can be you can be a family. You can be as small a group as, just a family. That family, if you have a close family where the people really identify as I'm a member of this family, then there's archetypes of that family that people can connect to. Now, let's say that you work for IBM, but you don't really feel like you're a part of it. You feel like you're an outsider. Well, you may work there, but if you don't join the group, if you don't see yourself as an IBM guy, then the collective consciousness won't affect you very much. Mm-hmm. You won't get much feedback from it. It will be a very light touch. So you may be a citizen of Brazil, and if you really have an identity, I'm a Brazilian, then you'll get more of that collective Brazilian archetype, and it'll mean more to you. You'll give more to it, and you'll get more back from it than if you just live there, but don't really identify very strongly, with the country. So that's collective consciousness. And that's really what Carl Jung was talking about in his archetypes. He didn't understand that it was just it's a function of consciousness, but he did understand that there are these archetypes, and that these archetypes actually come with content. And people who are members of a particular group get that content. That content is connected to them, because when you say, I'm a member of a group, you kind of open a link, if you will. You open a psychic or a mental link to that group. And now you change the group a little because you kind of share your stuff. But because you're only one and that group is big, then mostly the group affects you a whole lot more than you affect the group.
They carry more weight.
Yeah, they carry a lot more weight. So you end up being more like the group. So any organization, it could be a church organization, like I say, or a occupation, all plumbers, might, if they really identify with I'm a plumber, then all plumbers would form a group, and there would be some archetype that would have to do with plumbing and being a plumber. And if you really identify with that, you start getting information about plumbing, and you become a little better plumber just because you associate in your mind with that group of people strongly. You'll start to, get some of that information, and you'll just get that as like intuition. It'll just be your intuition. Well, I should use this kind of valve instead of that kind of valve. You'll get that intuition, and that's you tapping into that larger archetype of plumbers. So it's interesting. All the groups we're in, we're a member of a family. We may be a member of a church, or a member of a social club, a member of a country, a member of a state. Who knows? We got all kinds of things. Maybe we're a member of the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, or some social organization. And it works the same way. As we become part of that social organization, we start acting more like the people in that social organization. Now, one of the nice things about this collective consciousness is we talked about the mob, where the mob pulls everybody down to a lower level of behavior, a lower level of evolution, just because everybody gets more angry. Well, the same thing happens with people who are very evolved. If you have somebody who has very little fear, and they're full of love and caring and cooperation and compassion, and you hang out with that person, well, it just pulls you up a little bit. And if you identify with groups that are like that, and you interact with them, and you identify, it pulls you up a little bit. So you find it easier to get rid of your fear, and easier to not get upset or not get angry, because now you're hanging out with a group that is a higher quality group than you are. So who you hang out with is really kind of important, because if you identify yourself as part of that group, you start becoming more like it. You start getting downloads from that collective consciousness. You have inclinations to kind of see things the way they see it. So that's why we tell our children it's very important who your friends are. Make sure, that you pick some really good quality people for friends, because that will affect your life. If you pick some very low quality people for friends, that will affect your life too, but not in a very good way. Yeah. So that is really what Carl Jung was talking about, was this collective consciousness. And it's an interesting thing, because we belong to so many groups, and we don't realize that they affect us. They give us insights sometimes, but sometimes they may give us beliefs, or sometimes they may give us fears, or they may give us more anger. They can give us all sorts of things, but they also can give us good things. So that's what that's about.
So